Please, Graham. If Noah's fever gets any worse tonight, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Emily Parker whispered the words as she typed them, because saying them out loud made the truth feel less survivable. Her thumb hovered over the glowing screen of her cracked phone while her 8-month-old son lay against her chest, his tiny body too warm beneath the faded blue blanket she had wrapped around him. The apartment was quiet except for the soft rattle of the old radiator and Noah's uneven little breaths. Outside the fourth-floor window, Queens shimmered under a cold December drizzle, the kind that turned sidewalks black and made every passing car sound like it was driving through broken glass. Emily had been awake for 31 hours. She knew because she had watched the digital clock on the microwave change from yesterday morning to last night to this impossible evening, each hour taking something from her until all that remained was fear. On the kitchen counter sat a half-empty bottle of infant fever reducer, a nearly empty can of formula, and $3 bills she had smoothed flat, as if neatness could somehow make them multiply. She had already called the after-hours clinic twice. The nurse had told her to monitor Noah, keep him hydrated, and bring him in if his breathing changed or his fever climbed again. That sounded simple to people with cars, credit cards, and someone to call. Emily had none of those things tonight. Her bank app showed $9.14. Her next paycheck from the flower shop would not arrive until Friday. The diner had cut her evening shifts after she missed 2 nights when Noah had an ear infection, and her landlord had taped a polite but terrifying notice to her door that morning, the kind with bold letters and no sympathy. She hated asking for help. She hated it so much that her stomach twisted every time she looked at Graham Miller's name in her contacts. Graham was her cousin, kind in the distracted way busy people were kind, and tonight he was supposed to be getting married at a small church in Albany. She had promised herself she would not bother him on his wedding day unless it was an emergency. Then Noah whimpered, his tiny fingers curling weakly against the collar of her sweatshirt, and pride became a luxury she could no longer afford. Emily blinked hard, fighting the sting in her eyes, and typed the rest of the message. I'm so sorry to ask today, but I need $80 for medicine and formula. I'll pay you back Friday. I swear I will. Noah is burning up, and I'm scared. Her hand trembled as she selected the contact saved as Groom G. She had added the label that morning after Graham joked that nobody should call him by his regular name on the biggest day of his life. Emily tried to smile when she remembered it, but the smile broke before it reached her face. Noah shifted, letting out a small, tired cry that made every thought inside her vanish except one. Send it. So she did. The message disappeared with a soft whoosh, and for one single second Emily felt the terrible relief of having thrown a rope into the dark. She lowered the phone to her lap, kissed Noah's damp forehead, and murmured, "It's okay, baby. Mommy's going to fix it." 3 miles away, behind the white marble walls of the Whitmore Grand Hotel, another groom stood in front of a gold-framed mirror while 2 attendants adjusted the cuffs of his custom black tuxedo. Alexander Whitmore, billionaire founder of Whitmore Capital, was supposed to walk down the aisle in 19 minutes. 400 guests waited beneath chandeliers imported from Italy. News cameras waited outside behind velvet ropes. His bride, Vanessa Hart, waited in a suite filled with white roses and photographers. Alexander's phone buzzed on the dressing table, and he glanced at it expecting a message from his assistant, his attorney, or the wedding planner who had already asked him 3 times whether he preferred the string quartet to begin before or after the family procession. Instead, he saw a message from an unknown number, raw and desperate enough to make the noise of the room fade. Please, Graham. If Noah's fever gets any worse tonight, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Alexander did not move. One attendant asked if the cuff felt too tight, but he barely heard him. His eyes locked on one word. Noah. It was only a name, common enough, harmless enough, but it struck him with the suddenness of a door opening inside a room he had kept sealed for years. Noah had been his younger brother's favorite name. The name Daniel once said he would give his son if life ever gave him the chance to become a better man than their father. Daniel had been gone for nearly a year, and the Whitmore family had spoken of him only in careful fragments since then. Alexander picked up the phone slowly. Another message appeared before he could respond. Please don't tell anyone I asked. I just need him to be okay. In a cold apartment across town, Emily stared at the screen, waiting for the little dots that would tell her Graham had seen it. Instead, a reply came from a number she did not recognize, attached to no familiar contact, no cousin, no safe name from her small and shrinking world. "I think you sent this to the wrong Groom," the stranger wrote. Emily's breath caught. The room seemed to tilt around her. Her tired eyes flew back to the contact, and only then did she see it. Not Graham Miller, not her cousin in Albany, but another Groom G saved from a floral delivery confirmation 2 weeks earlier, a client name she had never meant to keep, a man whose wedding flowers had cost more than 6 months of her rent. Alexander Whitmore. Her face went hot with humiliation, then cold with panic. She clutched Noah closer and typed with shaking fingers, "I'm sorry. Please ignore that. It was a mistake." She almost threw the phone away from her, as if distance could undo what she had sent. But before she could set it down, the stranger answered again, and the question on the screen made her heart stop for reasons she could not explain. "Who is Noah?" Alexander Whitmore stared at the question he had just sent, and for the first time that evening, the polished room around him felt completely unreal. The mirror reflected a man every magazine in New York had called untouchable, a man in a perfect black tuxedo with silver cuff links, calm eyes, and a face trained by decades of boardrooms never to reveal too much. But his hand was tightening around the phone so hard that the edge pressed into his palm. Behind him, the attendants continued moving softly, brushing lint from his shoulders, straightening the white pocket square, murmuring about timing and photographs as if the world still made sense. It did not. The name Noah sat on the screen like a memory that had somehow found a way to breathe. Daniel had said it years ago on a summer night in Maine, when they were both younger and less careful. "If I ever have a son, I will name him Noah," he had told Alexander, "because Noah means rest, and maybe by then I will finally know what that feels like." Alexander had laughed at the time, but Daniel had not. His younger brother had always carried sadness under his charm, the kind people mistook for irresponsibility until it was too late to ask what he was running from. Now Daniel was gone, buried beneath family statements, private regrets, and a silence their father had insisted was dignified. Alexander had spent the last year pretending silence was strength. Then a frightened woman had sent him a message about a baby with Daniel's chosen name, and something inside him refused to look away. His phone buzzed again. "He is my son. That is all. I am sorry I bothered you." Alexander read the words twice. My son. Not our son. Not his son. A careful answer from a woman who had learned that details could cost her something. He looked toward the door, where his assistant, Marjorie, stood with a tablet pressed to her chest, her expression tight with professional urgency. "The planner says we need to line up in 12 minutes, she said. "The Hart family is already seated. Vanessa is asking if you are ready." "Ready?" Alexander almost laughed, but the sound never came. He had spent 18 months building this marriage as if it were a merger, not a vow. Vanessa Hart was beautiful, intelligent, and born into the kind of old money that still opened doors even his fortune could not. Their engagement had pleased investors, delighted society pages, and satisfied two families who cared more about legacy than tenderness. Alexander had told himself that was enough. Love had never made his family safer. Love had not saved Daniel. His phone buzzed again before he could answer Marjorie. "Please do. Not call anyone. I can handle it." A second later came another line. "I just need to get through tonight." Alexander's jaw tightened. People who could handle it did not send desperate messages by accident. People who had helped did not apologize for needing medicine. He typed slowly. "How high is the fever?" There was no answer for several seconds. In the silence, the room's luxury became almost offensive. Crystal tumblers untouched on a silver tray, white orchids flown in from Hawaii, a watch on the dresser worth more than most families made in a year. Then her reply appeared. 102.9. It was lower earlier. "He is breathing, but he sounds tired." The nurse said to watch him. Alexander's eyes closed briefly. He was not a doctor, but he knew enough to understand fear when it was typed by shaking hands. "Where are you?" he wrote. The answer came faster this time. "No. I should not have said anything. You are getting married. I am sorry." So she knew who he was now. Of course she did. His wedding had been impossible to escape all week. Society pages, business blogs, hotel barricades, glossy photographs of Vanessa smiling beside him like a woman accepting a crown. Alexander glanced at the closed double doors beyond which 400 people waited for him to perform certainty. Then he looked back at the small glowing screen, at a stranger trying to disappear with a sick child in her arms. "Your baby matters more than my schedule," he typed. He stared at the sentence after sending it, surprised by how true it felt. Across town, Emily sat frozen on the floor of her kitchen, Noah heavy against her, her phone lighting her pale face. She wanted to reject the kindness before it turned into a debt. She wanted to block the number, hold her son tighter, and pretend she had not accidentally reached into the life of a man so far above her that even his wedding flowers had passed through her hands like museum pieces. But Noah gave a weak little cough, then whimpered as if even crying took too much energy. Emily's fear cracked through her pride. She did not send her address. Not yet. Instead, she pressed the microphone button, meaning to say, "We are fine." But when Noah stirred and made that thin, exhausted sound again, her thumb slipped. 3 seconds of audio sent before she could stop it. At the Whitmore Grand, Alexander played the voice message. The room around him went silent in his mind. He heard a baby crying softly, a young woman whispering, "I know, sweetheart, I know." And beneath it all, the unmistakable sound of someone trying not to fall apart. Marjorie stepped closer. "Alexander, is there a problem?" He lowered the phone. His expression had changed so completely that she stopped before saying another word. Outside, the first notes of the prelude began to rise through the hotel, elegant and distant, signaling that the wedding was moving forward with or without his heart in it. Alexander looked once more at the message thread, then typed a single sentence that made his choice feel inevitable. "Tell me where you are, Emily, before this becomes worse than pride can fix." Emily read the sentence 3 times, each time feeling a different kind of fear settle inside her. "Tell me where you are, Emily, before this becomes worse than pride can fix." He knew her name now. Of course he did, because her phone number had been attached to floral invoices, delivery forms, and the kind of electronic receipts that people like Alexander Whitmore probably had assistants to search in seconds. Still, seeing her name on his screen felt like a door opening too quickly. She shifted Noah against her shoulder and stood on unsteady legs, her knees aching from the cold kitchen floor. The apartment looked even smaller now that she imagined a billionaire seeing any part of it. The chipped cabinets, the thrift store couch with one sunken cushion, the folded laundry stacked in a basket because she had not had the strength to put it away, the tiny row of baby bottles drying beside the sink. Shame moved through her before she could stop it. Not because she had done anything wrong, but because poverty had a way of making every ordinary struggle feel like evidence against you. Her phone buzzed again. "I can send a pediatric nurse. I can send a car. You do not have to open the door to me." Emily closed her eyes. That should have made it easier. It did not. Men with money always knew how to sound reasonable before the cost appeared. She had learned that from Daniel Whitmore, though she had never spoken his last name aloud after he left. Daniel had not been cruel when she met him. That was the problem. Cruel men were easier to distrust. Daniel had been warm, funny, and beautifully lost, the kind of man who made gas station coffee feel like a date and promised that one day he would explain everything about his family. Then he vanished before Noah was born, leaving behind a disconnected number, a few photographs, and one letter she had not opened in months because hope could hurt more than hunger. Noah whimpered again, pulling her back to the present. His little cheek burned against her neck. Emily carried him to the counter and checked the thermometer once more, holding her breath until the numbers settled. 103.1 degrees. Her throat tightened. The clinic was 5 miles away. The bus stop was 3 blocks from her building. In good weather, that was manageable. In cold rain, with a sick baby and almost no money, it felt like crossing a country. She typed, "I do not want anything from you. I only messaged the wrong person. Please go get married." At the Whitmore Grand, Alexander watched the words appear while the prelude music floated faintly through the walls. He could almost picture the ceremony hall now. Vanessa waiting behind carved double doors, her father standing stiffly beside her, rows of guests turning their heads toward the aisle, every person expecting him to step into the version of his life they had all approved. His assistant Marjorie stood nearby, silent now, no longer asking whether he was ready. She had worked for him for 11 years. She knew the difference between hesitation and decision forming in real time. Alexander typed back, "A wedding can wait. A child with a rising fever should not." Before Emily could answer, the dressing room door opened and Vanessa Hart entered in a cloud of white silk, diamonds at her ears, her expression controlled but sharpened by embarrassment. "Everyone is seated," she said, looking first at Alexander and then at the phone in his hand. "My mother says the photographers are asking why you are not in position." Alexander slipped the phone into his palm but did not put it away. "Something has come up." Vanessa gave a small, careful laugh, the kind meant to remind everyone in the room of manners. "Alexander, we are minutes from our vows. Unless the stock market has collapsed or the building is on fire, nothing has come up." Marjorie looked down at her tablet. The attendants suddenly became fascinated by the cuff links on the dresser. Alexander's face remained calm, but something in his eyes cooled. "A baby is sick." Vanessa blinked, as if she had misheard him. "Whose baby?" The question sounded less concerned than offended. Alexander did not answer quickly enough. Vanessa's gaze dropped again to the phone, and understanding shifted into suspicion. "Please tell me you are not about to make our wedding late, because some stranger found your number." Across town, Emily stared at her own screen, horrified that she had pulled a man away from his wedding even for a moment. She imagined a beautiful bride somewhere, guests waiting, a perfect life interrupted by her cracked phone and desperate mistake. Her fingers moved fast. "Do not come. I mean it. I can take care of my son." Noah suddenly coughed against her shoulder, a small exhausted sound that broke at the end. Emily froze, listening. For one terrible second, the whole apartment seemed to hold its breath with her. Then Noah began to cry, weak but frightened, and Emily's resolve collapsed into motion. She grabbed the diaper bag, shoved in the medicine bottle, 2 diapers, a thin blanket, and the last scoop of formula in a plastic container. Her phone buzzed again, but she did not look until she had Noah zipped carefully inside his little blue jacket. Alexander's message waited on the screen. "I am not asking because I pity you. I am asking because someone should have come when you needed help the first time." Emily's hand went still on the diaper bag strap. The first time. He could not know what those words touched. He could not know about Daniel, about the night she waited by the window until sunrise, about the unopened letter hidden in a coffee tin above the stove. Another message appeared. "Send the address, or send the nearest corner. Keep the baby warm. Do not walk in the rain if his fever is rising." In the hotel dressing room, Vanessa stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper sharp enough for only him to hear. "Whatever this is, Alexander, it can wait until after the ceremony." Alexander looked past her toward the hallway, where the music had changed and the wedding planner was beginning to panic. Then he looked down at the phone just as Emily finally sent 4 words and a location pin. "Please just send help." Alexander closed his hand around the phone and turned to Marjorie. "Call Dr. Levin. Tell him it is urgent. Have my car brought to the side entrance." Vanessa's face went pale with disbelief. "You are not serious." Alexander was already removing the white rose from his lapel. "I have never been more serious in my life." Vanessa stared at the white rose in Alexander's hand, as if he had removed something far more important than a flower. For a moment, no one in the dressing room moved. The music beyond the walls continued with graceful indifference, swelling through the hotel corridors while guests waited beneath chandeliers and rows of ivory roses. Alexander handed the boutonniere to Marjorie without looking away from his phone. "Dr. Levin is on the Upper East Side," Marjorie said quickly, already speaking into her headset while her fingers moved across the tablet. "He can be there in approximately 20 minutes if traffic holds. The car is being brought to the service entrance." "Send him the address now," Alexander said. "Tell him the child is 8 months old, fever above 103 degrees, possible respiratory fatigue. Mother has limited transportation." Vanessa's lips parted, then closed again as anger replaced shock. "Mother," she repeated softly. "So there is a mother." Alexander looked at her then, and the steadiness in his expression only seemed to upset her more. "There is a frightened woman with a sick baby. On our wedding day. On any day, that would still matter." The words landed quietly, but everyone in the room felt them. One of the attendants lowered his eyes. Marjorie turned slightly away, pretending to focus on the call. Vanessa took a breath, gathering herself the way she always did before cameras, before charity boards, before rooms full of people who expected elegance from her even when she was furious. Alexander, listen to me. I understand that you have some need to rescue people. It is one of the things your publicists adore about you. But there are 400 guests waiting downstairs, including my father, your board members, and half of the people who helped make this wedding possible. You cannot disappear because a stranger sent an emotional message. Alexander's jaw tightened at the word emotional, as if emotion were something embarrassing, something beneath them. His phone lit again before he could respond. A photo came through from Emily, not of her face, but of a thermometer resting on a kitchen counter beside a baby bottle. 103.2. Then another message. He keeps falling asleep, but wakes up crying. I am scared to take him outside. The rain is getting worse. Alexander felt the final thread of hesitation break. Marjorie, have the driver bring the car around now. I am going with Dr. Levin if he is closer, or I am going ahead of him if he is not. Vanessa gave a short, stunned laugh. You are leaving. It was not a question. He slipped the phone into his jacket pocket. Yes. Her face changed in a way he had never seen before. Not sadness. Not heartbreak. Humiliation. The kind born from being watched, judged, and publicly inconvenienced. Do you understand what this will look like? She asked. The groom walking out before the vows? People will talk about this for years. Alexander looked toward the mirror and saw them reflected together. Vanessa in white, flawless and bright, and himself in black, polished and hollow. For months, he had mistaken compatibility for commitment. He had mistaken silence for peace. He had agreed to a life that looked perfect from the outside because the inside of his own life had been too painful to examine. Then a baby's weak cry had come through his phone, and perfection had suddenly looked useless. Let them talk, he said. Vanessa's eyes flashed. You owe me more than that. I owe that child a chance to be safe tonight. Why? She demanded, the control in her voice finally cracking. Why does this particular child matter so much to you? Alexander did not answer. He could not explain Daniel. Not here, not with attendants listening and wedding music rising like a countdown. He could not explain the name Noah without opening a door his family had nailed shut. Vanessa stepped closer, lowering her voice until it was almost a warning. If you walk out that door, do not expect me to stand at the altar and smile like nothing happened. Alexander met her eyes, and for the first time all evening, he felt no fear of disappointing her. I would not ask you to. Outside the dressing room, the wedding planner's voice fluttered anxiously through the hallway, asking if the groom was ready. Alexander opened the door himself. The corridor smelled of roses, expensive perfume, and polished marble. At the far end, beyond the turn toward the ceremony hall, he could see ushers shifting nervously and hear the low murmur of hundreds of guests beginning to wonder. Marjorie hurried beside him, phone to her ear. Dr. Levin has the address. Your driver is at the service entrance. Security can clear the side hallway. No public exit, Alexander said. This is not a spectacle, but it was already becoming one. A bridesmaid rounded the corner and froze when she saw him walking away from the ceremony instead of toward it. Then Vanessa appeared behind him, her white dress whispering over the marble floor. Alexander, she called, and the single word carried enough force to turn several heads. He stopped, but did not turn around immediately. His phone buzzed again. Emily had sent one more message. Please hurry. Alexander closed his eyes for half a second, then opened them with a decision so complete it felt like relief. He looked back at Vanessa, not cruelly, not coldly, but with a truth neither of them could dress up anymore. A sick child cannot wait for polite timing. Then he walked toward the side entrance, away from the music, away from the altar, and toward a woman in Queens who still had no idea that the name she was afraid to say was the same name that had just broken open his past. The service hallway behind the Whitmore Grand smelled of raincoats, catering trays, and floor polish, a narrow hidden world running behind the polished beauty of the ballroom. Alexander moved through it quickly with Marjorie at his side, his tuxedo jacket open now, his phone in one hand, and the rest of his life seeming to fall away behind him with every step. Somewhere above them, the string quartet continued playing for guests who did not yet understand that the ceremony had cracked down the center. Somewhere behind him, Vanessa was probably surrounded by bridesmaids, relatives, and explanations no one would believe. Alexander knew there would be consequences. Headlines, calls from board members, a furious Hart family, his father's voice asking why he had humiliated them in public. But none of those voices could compete with the one memory Daniel had left behind, soft and careless on a summer dock in Maine. Saying Noah, like the name itself, was a promise. The side door opened, and cold rain swept in. His black sedan waited beneath the awning, headlights shining across the wet pavement. Marjorie paused at the door. Dr. Levin is 6 minutes away from the address. You are 12 minutes away if traffic does not lock up near the bridge. Alexander opened the car door. Then he gets there first. I still go. There is one more thing, Marjorie said, lowering her voice. I checked the floral vendor records. Emily Parker works part-time with Bellamy Flowers. She handled the confirmation for this wedding 2 weeks ago. That is likely how your number was saved in her phone. Alexander stopped with one hand on the door. Anything else? Marjorie hesitated. No public records linking her to you. No lawsuits. No press. No obvious attempt to contact your family before tonight. In other words, not a trap. Not an opportunist. Just a frightened mother who had reached the wrong man at the worst possible moment. Alexander nodded once and got into the car. As the driver pulled away from the service entrance, his phone buzzed again. A call this time. Emily Parker. He answered immediately. For 1 second, all he heard was rain against a window and the fragile sound of a baby fussing. Then Emily's voice came through, thin with embarrassment and fear. Mr. Whitmore, I am sorry. I should not have sent my address. I panicked. I do not want you to come here. Just the doctor is enough. Alexander looked out at the blurred lights of Manhattan sliding past the tinted glass. Dr. Levin is already on his way. I am coming because you should not have to deal with this alone. You do not know me. No, I do not. Then why are you doing this? Her voice tightened on the question, as if she expected the answer to hurt. Alexander heard the suspicion beneath it and respected it. Desperation might make someone ask for help, but experience taught them to fear receiving it. Because your son is sick, he said. That is enough. Emily gave a small, unsteady breath that was almost a laugh and almost a sob. People like you do not leave weddings because a stranger has a sick baby. Apparently I do. No, she whispered. People like you send money, or assistants, or lawyers. Then later, there is always a reason they did it. Always. Alexander's gaze sharpened. Who taught you that? Silence filled the line so quickly he knew he had touched something real. Across town, Emily stood in the middle of her apartment with Noah against her shoulder, watching the rain streak down the glass. She had locked the door, then unlocked it, then locked it again. The diaper bag sat by her feet. She had changed Noah into a warmer sleeper beneath his jacket, but his cheeks were still flushed, his lashes damp from crying. The thought of a doctor coming should have relieved her. Instead, it made the apartment feel exposed, every poor corner waiting to be judged. No one, she said finally. Forget I said that. Emily. The way Alexander said her name was calm, not demanding, and somehow that made her more afraid. I'm not asking for anything from you. No payment, no favor, no explanation you are not ready to give. I only need you to open the door for the doctor when he arrives. She pressed her lips together and looked at the old coffee tin above the stove. The one with Daniel's letter hidden inside. The last man who said he wanted to help me had a family name that opened every door in New York, she said before she could stop herself. He made everything sound temporary. The secrecy, the waiting, the promises. Then when I needed him, he disappeared before my baby was born. Alexander went very still in the back seat. The city lights moved over his face, but he did not blink. What was his name? Emily closed her eyes. The question was gentle, and that was what made it dangerous. She had protected Daniel's name for months, partly out of anger, partly because saying it aloud made Noah's father real again, and partly because the world he came from had never seemed like a place that would welcome her son. It does not matter, she said. It matters if he left you with a child and no support. You cannot fix that. Maybe not. But I can understand what happened. Emily shook her head, even though he could not see her. No, you cannot. Men like him do not get remembered the way women like me do. He gets to be complicated. I get to be careless. Alexander's voice lowered. Did he know about Noah? Emily looked down at her son, at the tiny hand curled against her sweatshirt. I tried to tell him, she said. His number stopped working. His apartment was empty. Then a woman from his building told me he was gone and that I should stop asking questions. The car seemed to shrink around Alexander. Emily, what was his name? Before she could answer, a sharp knock sounded at her apartment door. She startled, clutching Noah closer. Her phone nearly slipped from her hand. Someone is here. That should be Dr. Levin, Alexander said at once. He is gray-haired, wearing a navy coat, and he will show you identification. Keep me on the phone. Emily walked to the door with her heart pounding. Through the peephole, she saw an older man holding a medical bag, his expression kind and serious beneath rain-damp silver hair. Behind him stood the dim hallway of her building, with peeling paint and flickering lights. She opened the door just enough for the safety chain to catch. Miss Parker? I am Dr. Samuel Levin. Mr. Whitmore sent me. Hearing Alexander's name spoken aloud in her hallway made everything feel impossibly real. Emily removed the chain and let the doctor in. As he crossed the threshold, Noah gave another weak cry, and Dr. Levin's attention went directly to the baby. On the phone, Alexander's voice remained steady. I am 8 minutes away. Emily watched the doctor set his bag on her kitchen table beside the empty formula can and the unpaid clinic bill. Shame rose again, but this time fear was stronger. Mr. Whitmore, she whispered, you should not be coming here. Why? Alexander asked. Emily looked at Noah, then at the doctor, then at the coffee tin above the stove. The name she had buried pressed against her teeth like a secret begging to escape. Because the man who left us, she said, her voice barely audible, was named Daniel. In the back of the sedan, Alexander stopped breathing. Emily added the last name before courage failed her completely. Daniel Whitmore. The name moved through the car like a sound Alexander had been trying not to hear for a year. Daniel Whitmore. For several seconds, he could not answer. His driver turned onto the bridge toward Queens, windshield wipers sweeping hard against the rain, but Alexander barely noticed the city blurring beyond the glass. He was back in the family house in Connecticut, standing outside his father's study while raised voices cut through the wood-paneled walls. Daniel had come home after months away, looking thinner, quieter, carrying a duffel bag and refusing to say where he had been. Their father had called him reckless. Daniel had called the Whitmore name a cage. Alexander had stepped between them too late to understand the whole story, and by morning, Daniel was gone again. Weeks later, the official call came. No scandal, no details, no public grief beyond a short family statement. Daniel Whitmore had passed away unexpectedly while traveling. Private service. No further comment. Alexander had accepted the silence because grief made cowards of people who were used to control. Now a woman in a fourth-floor apartment in Queens had spoken his brother's name as if it had cost her everything, and an 8-month-old baby named Noah lay sick in her arms. Emily, he said carefully, his voice quieter than before. Daniel was my brother. On the other end of the line, all he heard was Dr. Levin opening his medical bag and Noah's faint whimper. Emily did not speak. She stood near the kitchen table, one hand pressed over her mouth, the other resting against Noah's back as Dr. Levin listened to the baby's breathing with a stethoscope. The room seemed to shift around her. Daniel had said he had family, powerful family, complicated family, people who would never understand her. But he had never told her enough. Never Alexander. Never a brother whose face appeared in magazines, on financial news, and now on the phone that had just become too heavy in her hand. No, she whispered finally. No, that is not possible. It is possible, Alexander said. Daniel Whitmore was my younger brother. Emily looked toward the coffee tin above the stove as if the letter hidden inside might answer for her. He told me his family would ruin everything if they knew about me. The sentence struck Alexander harder than accusation would have. Dr. Levin glanced up briefly, sensing the conversation had shifted but keeping his focus on Noah. Miss Parker, he said gently. His fever is high, but his lungs sound clear. I want to bring it down and watch his hydration. Do you have infant acetaminophen? Emily nodded quickly and reached for the half-empty bottle on the counter. I gave him some earlier, but I was afraid to give too much. You did the right thing by being careful, the doctor said. We will measure it properly. That small sentence, you did the right thing, nearly broke her. For months, every choice had felt like a test she was failing. The cheaper diapers, the watered-down soup for herself, the missed shift, the late rent, the unanswered questions from people who looked at her ringless hand and then at her baby. She turned away before Dr. Levin could see her eyes fill. Alexander heard the change in her breathing through the phone. Emily, listen to me. I do not know what Daniel told you. I do not know what he was running from. But I did not know about you, and I did not know about. Noah. Would it have mattered? She asked, and the pain in her voice made the question feel older than tonight. If I had walked into your office pregnant and said your brother left me, would anyone have believed me? Alexander looked down at his wedding clothes, at the perfect cuffs, the polished shoes, the life built to be believed before he even opened his mouth. He could not offer her an easy lie. I do not know what my family would have done, he said, but I know what I am doing now. Emily shut her eyes. You are coming because of Daniel. I am coming because of Noah. Daniel is why I need the truth. The sedan rolled off the bridge and into Queens, the streets narrower now, lined with brick apartment buildings, laundromats, corner stores, and rain-slicked sidewalks shining under yellow streetlights. Alexander's phone buzzed with another incoming call. Vanessa. He declined it. A second call followed immediately from his father. He declined that one too. Marjorie sent a message. The ceremony has been paused. Hart family furious. Press asking questions. Alexander read it and felt strangely nothing. Not because it did not matter, but because it no longer mattered most. In Emily's apartment, Dr. Levin carefully gave Noah the correct dose of medicine, then showed Emily how to keep him comfortable and what warning signs to watch for. Noah's crying softened to a tired murmur. Emily held him close, rocking gently beside the kitchen table. The phone was still in her hand. Daniel never knew I named him Noah, she said suddenly. Alexander leaned forward, his throat tight. Why did you choose it? Because he once told me it meant rest, she said. He said he had never had much of that. Alexander pressed his thumb against his eyes, but his voice stayed steady. He said the same thing to me. The shared memory settled between them, fragile and undeniable. For the first time, Emily truly believed him. Outside, tires hissed against wet pavement. A black sedan slowed in front of her building. Alexander looked up at the cracked brick facade, the narrow entrance, the fourth-floor windows glowing faintly above. I am here, he said. Emily's heart began to pound. She crossed to the window with Noah in her arms and pulled the curtain aside just enough to see a tall man step out into the rain in a groom's black tuxedo. He looked up at her building as if he had reached the edge of a life he could never return to unchanged. Behind Emily, Dr. Levin zipped his medical bag. On the stove, the old coffee tin sat untouched, holding the letter Daniel had left behind. And for the first time since Noah was born, Emily understood that the secret she had buried to protect her son had just opened the door to the most powerful family in New York. Alexander climbed the narrow stairs because the elevator in Emily's building had a handwritten sign taped to it that said out of service, and with every floor he passed, the distance between the Whitmore Grand and this place became more than miles. The stairwell smelled faintly of damp coats, old paint, and someone's dinner warming behind a closed door. His polished shoes stepped over worn linoleum, his tuxedo catching the dim yellow light, making him look almost absurd in a building where nothing had been designed for elegance. On the second floor, his phone rang again. Vanessa. He declined it without slowing. On the third floor, Marjorie called, and this time he answered. The Hart family is demanding a statement, she said, her voice tight. Your father has arrived at the hotel. He wants to know where you are. Alexander paused on the landing for half a breath. Tell him I am with family. Marjorie went silent. She knew him too well to ask if he was certain. And the press? No comment. Vanessa says if you do not return immediately, the wedding is over. Alexander looked up toward the fourth floor, where a baby he had never met carried his brother's chosen name. Then it was never what it needed to be. He ended the call before Marjorie could answer. At the end of the hallway, apartment 4C had a thin strip of light beneath the door. Alexander stopped outside it, suddenly aware of the rain on his shoulders, the expensive fabric of his tuxedo, the life he represented, and the woman on the other side who had every reason to distrust all of it. He lifted his hand and knocked softly, not like a man used to being obeyed, but like someone asking permission to enter a fragile room. Inside, Emily froze. Dr. Levin had just finished checking Noah's temperature again. It had begun to lower, not enough to erase the fear, but enough for her to breathe without feeling the world close around her. Noah lay against her chest, drowsy and warm, his tiny hand curled near her collarbone. The knock was gentle. That made it worse somehow. She had imagined a billionaire arriving with noise, authority, impatience, people behind him carrying clipboards and judgment. Instead, there There was only that quiet knock. Dr. Levin looked at her. "You do not have to open it if you are not ready," he said. Emily almost laughed at the word ready. Nothing in her life had waited until she was ready. Not motherhood. Not Daniel leaving. Not hunger. Not tonight. She walked to the door and looked through the peephole. Alexander Whitmore stood in the hallway alone, his dark hair damp from rain, his bow tie slightly loosened, his face nothing like the distant magazine photos she had seen. He looked tired. He looked shaken. He looked human. Emily opened the door only halfway. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. Alexander's gaze dropped first to Noah, bundled against her, then returned to Emily's face with a kind of restraint that felt almost painful. He did not step forward. He did not look around the apartment. He did not ask for proof. "Miss Parker," he said quietly, "is he stable?" The question undid something in her. Not is he really Daniel's? Not why did you never come forward? Not what do you want from me? Just is he stable? Emily nodded, swallowing hard. Dr. Levin says his lungs sound clear. His fever is coming down a little. Alexander exhaled slowly, as if he had been holding his breath since the hotel. Dr. Levin came forward then, professional and calm. "Mr. Whitmore, I believe we caught it early. He needs monitoring tonight, fluids, and a follow-up if the fever rises again. I would prefer they not be alone if symptoms change." Emily stiffened. "We will be fine." Alexander heard the wall go up in her voice and did not push against it. "I can arrange a private nurse. For the night. She can stay in the hallway if that makes you more comfortable." "No," Emily's answer came too quickly. "I do not want strangers here. I do not want people asking questions. I do not want your family deciding my son is a problem to solve." Alexander looked at her then, really looked at her, and saw the exhaustion under her pride. She was young, but not fragile. Worn down, but not broken. Standing in a faded sweatshirt, holding a sick child, she had more dignity than half the people waiting in silk and diamonds at his abandoned wedding. "Noah is not a problem," he said. "He may be my nephew." Emily flinched at the word, not because it was cruel, but because it was too close to belonging. "You do not know that." "No," Alexander admitted. "But Daniel was my brother, and your son deserves the truth." Noah stirred at the sound of Daniel's name, opening his eyes for a brief, unfocused moment. They were gray-blue in the dim light, soft and sleepy, but Alexander felt the room tilt. He had seen those eyes in childhood photographs, in the mirror beside him when Daniel was 12 and grinning through missing teeth, in the last family portrait their father had locked away after the funeral. Emily noticed the change in his face and tightened her hold on Noah. "Do not look at him like that." Alexander forced himself to breathe. "Like what?" "Like you already see someone else." The words were quiet, but they carried months of loneliness. Alexander nodded, accepting the correction. "You are right. I am sorry." That apology, simple and immediate, unsettled her more than any demand could have. Behind them, Dr. Levin packed his bag and gave final instructions in a soft voice, leaving medicine dosage written clearly on a notepad by the sink. When he left, the apartment became smaller with only Emily, Alexander, and the baby between them. Rain tapped the window. A siren passed somewhere far below, fading into the city. Alexander's phone buzzed again, lighting with his father's name. Emily saw it. "You should answer." "Not yet. Your family will come after you." "They can wait." "They will come after me," she said, and there it was, the fear beneath everything. Alexander put the phone face down on the counter. "Then they will have to go through me first." Emily wanted to believe him. That was the dangerous part. Her eyes moved, almost unwillingly, to the old coffee tin above the stove. Alexander followed the glance. "What is in there?" She did not answer. Noah sighed against her chest, calmer now, his tiny fingers relaxing. Emily reached up slowly, took down the tin, and held it as if it weighed more than metal should. "The only thing Daniel left behind," she whispered. Alexander's face changed. "A letter?" Emily nodded. "I never showed anyone." She opened the tin, but before she could take the envelope out, Alexander's phone rang again. This time, the name on the screen was not his father's. It was the private security desk at the Whitmore Grand, and the message that followed made his blood run cold. "Mr. Whitmore, your father is on his way to Queens." Emily's fingers closed around the envelope, but she did not pull it from the tin. The message on Alexander's phone seemed to drain the warmth from the apartment more completely than the rain outside ever could. "Your father is on his way to Queens." Alexander read it twice, then turned the screen face down again, but Emily had already seen enough in his expression. The little color she had regained while Noah's fever began to lower disappeared from her face. "Your father knows where I live?" she asked. Alexander did not answer quickly, and that was answer enough. Emily took a step back with Noah against her chest, the coffee tin clutched in her other hand. "How?" "Security at the hotel may have traced the car route," Alexander said carefully. "Or Vanessa told someone I left for a woman in Queens, and my father found the rest through my driver. That is supposed to make me feel better? No, it is supposed to be the truth." Emily gave a small, humorless laugh, but her eyes were bright with fear. "This is exactly what I did not want. I let one person help me for 1 hour, and now the Whitmore family is coming to my door." Alexander stepped between her and the apartment entrance without making it look like a threat. "He will not come in unless you allow it. Men like your father do not ask permission." The words were out before she could soften them. Alexander absorbed them in silence because she was not wrong about the world that had raised him. His father, Charles Whitmore, had built a fortune by making rooms rearrange themselves around his will. He did not shout when he was angry. He did not need to. His disappointment had its own weather. Alexander had spent half his life becoming powerful enough not to fear it, only to discover tonight that the one place he still felt like a son was wherever Daniel's memory was involved. Noah stirred softly, and Emily looked down at him. His cheeks were still flushed, but his breathing had eased. Dr. Levin had left only 7 minutes ago, and already the quiet she needed for her baby was being replaced by the approach of a man she had never met and had feared without knowing his name. Alexander's phone buzzed again. This time, it was Marjorie. He answered on speaker without thinking, then immediately regretted it when her voice came through tense and low. "Alexander, your father left the hotel with 2 cars. I tried to delay him. He said if the woman has Daniel's child, he will handle it before the press hears anything." Emily's face went still. Not frightened now. Wounded. "Handle it," she repeated. Alexander closed his eyes briefly. "Marjorie, call my legal team. Tell them nobody from the family office contacts Miss Parker, her landlord, her employer, or any medical provider. Nobody. Put it in writing." "Already drafting," Marjorie said. "And Alexander?" "What?" "Vanessa's father is threatening to go public first." Emily looked away, shame flooding her face as if headlines that did not yet exist were already accusing her. Alexander's voice hardened. "Then prepare a statement that says I left because a child needed emergency medical care. Nothing more. No names." He ended the call and turned to Emily. "No one will use your name." She held the tin tighter. "You cannot promise that. I can promise they will regret it if they try." For a moment, the apartment was silent except for rain and Noah's faint breathing. Emily wanted to hate the certainty in Alexander's voice, but some exhausted part of her leaned toward it before she could stop herself. She looked at the envelope again. It was creased from being opened and folded too many times in the first weeks after Noah's birth, then ignored for months because each reading only gave her questions no one would answer. Daniel's handwriting covered the front. "For Emily, if I fail to say this right." Her thumb brushed the ink. "He left this the last night I saw him," she said. Alexander's attention moved fully to the envelope. "What does it say?" "I never understood all of it." Her voice lowered. "He wrote that if anyone from his family came looking, I should not trust the first story they told me. He wrote that he had made mistakes, but Noah was not one of them." Alexander's face changed at the baby's name. "He knew?" Emily nodded, tears finally slipping over despite her effort to hold them back. "I told him I was pregnant 3 days before he disappeared." He cried. Not because he was angry, because he said for the first time in his life, something good had happened that he did not know how to protect. Alexander looked down, grief moving through him with a force he had not allowed himself at the funeral. Daniel had known. Daniel had wanted the child. Daniel had been afraid. The missing pieces no longer felt random. They felt arranged by someone with power. A car door closed outside. Then another. Emily froze. Alexander moved to the window and parted the curtain. 2 black vehicles had pulled up behind his sedan. A tall older man in a dark overcoat stepped onto the wet sidewalk, silver hair shining beneath the streetlight, posture straight, face lifted toward the 4th-floor windows as if he owned the building simply because he had found it. Charles Whitmore had arrived. Emily saw him from beside Alexander and instinctively drew Noah closer. "That is him." Alexander nodded. Yes. He looks like Daniel, she whispered, and Alexander heard the pain in it. A heavy knock sounded from downstairs first, then voices in the entryway, then footsteps beginning up the stairs. Not rushed, not uncertain, controlled, entitled. Alexander took out his phone and called the driver. No one else comes up. After my father. Keep the hallway clear. Then he turned back to Emily. You do not have to speak to him. If I hide, he will think I am weak. You are not weak. She looked at him then, really looked, and something in her expression steadied. No, I am Noah's mother. Alexander stepped aside, not in front of her now, but beside her. The footsteps reached the fourth floor. Emily placed the coffee tin on the table, took the envelope into her hand, and held Noah close as the knock came at her door, firm and final. Alexander opened it before his father could knock again. Charles Whitmore stood in the hallway, rain on his overcoat, eyes moving from Alexander's undone bow tie to Emily's pale face to the baby in her arms. For the first time, his controlled expression faltered. His gaze locked on Noah's eyes. The hallway seemed to lose all sound. Then Charles whispered one word Alexander had not expected. Daniel. Charles Whitmore stood in the doorway as if the past had reached through the dim hallway and taken hold of him by the throat. The single word he had whispered, Daniel, seemed to hang between everyone in the apartment, trembling with meanings Emily did not yet understand. Noah stirred against her chest, his fever-warm cheek resting on her sweatshirt, his little eyes half open in the yellow kitchen light. Charles stared at the baby with a grief so sudden and naked that, for one brief second, he no longer looked like the kind of man who could send cars through the rain and make families disappear into silence. He looked like a father who had lost a son and had just seen the shape of him return. Then the mask came back. His shoulders squared. His eyes moved to Emily, to the faded couch, to the medicine bottle on the counter, to the unpaid clinic bill near the sink, and finally to the envelope in her hand. Who are you? He asked. Alexander stepped forward before Emily could answer. Careful. Charles did not look at him. I asked her. Emily felt Noah's tiny fingers flex against her collar. Fear moved through her, but behind it came something stronger, built over months of rocking a baby alone at 3 in the morning, counting formula scoops, walking to work, in bad weather, and refusing to let shame become the story her son inherited. My name is Emily Parker, she said. This is my son, Noah. Charles's jaw tightened at the name. Why did you never contact us? A bitter laugh almost escaped her, but she swallowed it. I tried to contact Daniel. His phone stopped working. His apartment was empty. No one from your family ever came looking for me. We did not know you existed. Maybe Daniel did not believe you would let us. Alexander turned sharply toward his father. Charles looked away for half a second, and that half second told Alexander more than denial would have. What did you do? Alexander asked quietly. Charles's face hardened. This is not the place. It became the place when you came to her door. Emily looked down at the envelope, then held it out with a hand that trembled only slightly. Daniel left this for me. Charles's eyes locked on it, and for the first time since entering the apartment, he seemed uncertain. Alexander took the envelope gently when Emily nodded, but he did not open it until she said, Read it. His fingers unfolded the pages, careful with the creases. Daniel's handwriting slanted across the paper, hurried in some lines, steadier in others. Alexander began to read silently, but the first sentence made his breath catch. Emily, if I fail to say this right, it is because I have spent my whole life being taught to hide the only things that ever mattered. The room went very still. Alexander continued, his voice low now, reading only what Emily allowed the room to hear. Daniel had written that he loved her, that he knew about the baby, that he had planned to tell Alexander first, because Alexander was the only Whitmore he still believed might choose people over reputation. He had written that Charles had found out about Emily before Daniel was ready, and had warned him that any woman tied to the family name would be investigated, judged, and managed. Charles closed his eyes. Emily's grip tightened around Noah. Alexander's voice changed when he reached the final lines. If anything happens to me, find my brother Alexander. Not my father. Not the family office. Alexander. He deserves to know. About our son. And if our baby is a boy, I hope you still name him Noah. I want him to have the rest I never found. For a long moment, no one spoke. Rain tapped the window softly, almost gently now. Charles sank into the nearest chair as if age had arrived all at once. I did not know she was pregnant, he said, and his voice was different, rougher. Daniel told me there was a woman. I thought he was being reckless again. I told him to wait, to be certain, to keep the family out of it until I understood who she was. Emily's eyes filled, but her voice stayed steady. You mean until you understood whether I was acceptable? Charles looked at her then, and for once he had no polished answer. Alexander folded the letter slowly. You should have told me. Charles nodded once, barely. Yes. The admission did not fix anything. It did not bring Daniel back. It did not erase Emily's empty nights, or Noah's missing father, or the fear that had lived in her body so long it felt like instinct. But it shifted the room. Truth, however late, had entered. Noah gave a soft sigh and settled more deeply against Emily. Dr. Levin's instructions lay on the table beside the medicine, ordinary and practical, proof that the baby's immediate danger had eased. Alexander looked at Emily. Noah needs stability, medical care, and protection from whatever comes after tonight. But none of that gives us the right to take over your life. She searched his face, looking for the trap, the condition, the hidden price. And your wedding? She asked. Alexander looked at his rain-damp cuffs, then at the phone still lighting silently with calls he no longer wished to answer. Some things end because something truer arrives. Charles lifted his gaze to the baby again, but this time he did not say Daniel's name. May I know my grandson? Emily held Noah closer by instinct. Alexander saw it and stepped slightly toward his father. Charles noticed. Slowly, carefully, he added, when his mother is ready. That sentence did what all his money could not. It gave Emily a choice. Her eyes lowered to her son, to the child she had protected from a family she had feared without ever meeting, and then to the letter that proved Daniel had wanted them found, but not controlled. Not tonight, she said softly. Tonight he sleeps. Charles bowed his head. Then tonight he sleeps. Alexander moved to the counter and picked up Noah's unfinished birth certificate form beneath the clinic bill. Emily had left the father's line blank. He looked at it, then at the letter, then at Emily. Whenever you decide what belongs there, he said, I will make sure no one questions your right to decide it. Emily's lips trembled, but this time the tears that came were not only from fear. Outside, more cars were arriving, and somewhere across the city, a ballroom full of guests was learning that Alexander Whitmore had not returned to his own ceremony. But inside the small apartment, a baby's fever was easing, a mother was still standing, and a family built on silence had finally been forced to hear the truth. Then, just as Emily thought the night could hold no more, Charles looked at the letter again and whispered. There was another page. Alexander froze. Emily frowned. No, that is all he left me. Charles shook his head slowly, his face losing color. Daniel gave me a sealed page before he disappeared. I never opened it. Alexander's voice dropped. Where is it? Charles looked from Noah to Emily, then back to his son. In my safe. And if what he wrote is true, Noah may not be the only secret Daniel left behind.